Good morning, Heritage. We just finished a series called Tuned In, where we're listening to God's voice. And today, we're going to start a 2-week series called Blind Spots. This is kind of a part 2 of Blind Spots. We did another 2-week stint earlier this year. But I think we all understand what blind spots are. If you drive, you know you have a rear view mirror, you have some side mirrors. And even with all the mirrors, it's possible for a vehicle to sneak in that blind spot where you can't see them. We all have blind spots in our lives. And these are important to just understand and see because they could be so destructive if we don't make note of them. And so today we're going to be looking at the blind spot of anger. And I tell you, when I was given this topic, I had to chuckle, and then I got rid of people who know me because you're speaking about anger, Reg. You're one of the coolest dudes I've ever met. You never lose your temper. It's not true. I am one of those trash compactor type anger management people where I'll stuff it and stuff it and stuff it, and when finally I can't stuff it anymore and it comes out, it is wow. Last year, my wife and I were facing some big things as a family. And we decided to do something that we don't often do, but we decided just to take a time of fast. Now, there's a lot of things you can fast. We chose fast food. Things dominate our attention so we could tune in a little bit more on what God wants us to tune in and try to hear His voice and pray for not only discernment about the future, but there's just a lot of things during that fast. And we were about halfway into this fast. And I don't know if you've ever done a food fast before, but how many people know that the emotion of being hangry is a very real emotion, okay? You're driving, and in fast food restaurants, you have no problem fasting. All of a sudden look absolutely delish, you know? And it's just, everything changes. Well, I was on my way to a meeting, and I got off the freeway, and I turned on the road, which the building that I was meeting in was on, but it was a long, straight road, and it had a number of stoplights. And as I was getting off the freeway, I saw a row of cars as far as I could see. Now, I was pushing against the starting of that meeting already, so already the angst within me was rising, right? So I got through the first stoplight, and I remember this so clearly. The second stoplight, I was the third car in line. Now, just kind of picture that. So there was 2 cars ahead of me in my lane. When you're third in line, you're relaxed. When that light turns green, you're easily going to. Now, if you're 10 or 11 in line, then you're like, maybe I'll have to sit through this again, right? So I was third in line, pretty relaxed. Light turns green. The person in the front, the brake lights never went. And I was looking through 2 windshields, and I could easily see this guy was on his phone. Now, I don't know if you've ever had this, but you know how anger can go from 0 to 100 in about 2 seconds? I exploded inside of my enclosed car. I started yelling at this guy 2 cars ahead of me, get off your phone, all right? And then I remember using the God-given piece of equipment for cars to keep us from being homicidal maniacs. I used the horn. Now, I wish I could say it was a nice Christian horn, a little toot-toot. No! I laid into that thing. It was a straight going to hell horn hawk, okay? Couple of things happened really fast after that. There was an elderly lady beautiful lady in front of me, the car between the car I was honking at. She turned around and gave Claire the face. And she flipped me off. Now, that doesn't happen very often. So you would think that would just kind of calm me down. Oh no, man, that just fired me up even more. And I remember yelling at her in my enclosed car, a contextualized woman. That honk was not even meant for you. It was clearly a hook honk designed to go right around you and land on the car in front of you. In fact, I did it for you. You should have been the one honking. You should thank me. Well, my call didn't work. The guy finally got off his phone, gunned it through the stoplight. She made it through. I was so angry, I decided to also realizing very quickly that was a massive mistake. And the reason is I knew I had to stay behind her then the rest of the way down this road, because I had just recently commissioned my daughter to put a Christian in my car. And I said, man, if I pass her and she sees a Christian bumper sticker, I could ruin the cause of Christ in her life. I could live with that. You know, it's interesting that anger is one of those things that can well be a blind spot and we don't deal with it. In fact, you know, this thing of anger, Jesus thought it was so important that in the most famous sermon that he gave, which is the Sermon on the Mount, right, the end of his ministry, he deals with it at the beginning of his message. This was right when Jesus' popularity was increasing rapidly. People were traveling days. Think about that, days, just to hear him themselves. So he had this huge group of people around him on this mountain, and he gives the Sermon on the Mount. He says, man, this is something that's so big, and it's not the surface thing of we know and deal with, okay, when we blow up and get angry. It's what lurks underneath the surface. Look at what Jesus does when he gives this point that the root of so many other struggles in our life is anger. Anger is a catalyst. Look what lies beneath. In Matthew 5, verse 21, he says, you have heard that it has been said to people long ago, you shall not murder. And anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. To his audience, he is just stating, okay, you all know that one of the 10 commandments that was given to us in the Old Testament by Moses, one of those commandments is don't kill no one, right? And so you guys can be proud of that if you've never killed anyone. But he says, but I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. So Jesus is basically saying, man, you know, pretty good. Yeah. You know, break your arm trying to pat yourself on the back. And Jesus is saying, well, I want to go beyond just that and let you know that if you have anger toward anyone, and anger has a way of getting you kind of to justify it, right? That person ticked me off. That person deserved my anger. And it could be toward a spouse, family member, friend, or somebody you work with. Jesus says, but I say to you that some of you are not loving at all towards people. There's not a loving core inside of you. So he starts with this he has stages of anger that he talks about at the beginning of this Sermon on the Mount. And the first one is the slow burn type of anger. Then it goes to stage 2, which is contempt. Look at the next verse. Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, raka, R-A-C-A, is answerable to the court. Now, a lot of Bible translations keep the word raka in there. It's a word that we need some help with because it's not a word we use every day. For good reason. It's Aramaic, it's not English. And what raka means is basically to show contempt. It's basically you saying to somebody, you idiot. You're a worthless piece of scum, you fool, you bonehead, you loser, you jerk. And it was to express contempt for someone. Basically saying, I don't really care if you or not. Because in my mind, you're not even worthy of consideration. I mean, I would just never allow you into my circle. You would never be in my life because I view you as a worthless idiot. Let me tell you why Jesus wants to hit that point really hard at the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount. Because I think we know this, but God has put right at the core of our hearts, every one of us, basic need to belong to something, someone, or somewhere. And when I show contempt, raka, it just spits at that very deep need. I don't want you to belong to me or even be associated with me. I hate you. So it goes from the slow burn, anger, to stage 2, which is contempt, this raka. And then it goes, he says in the sermon, it goes to stage 3, which is a curse. And then verse, and if you curse someone, you are in danger of the fires of hell. Now, I don't think we need much help with that. When he uses the word curse, that's the words your mama told you never to use in public, right? So we know what these words are, but it's something about, I don't want to you. I want to really hurt you. I take some kind of pain on you. It starts with a slow burn type of anger, contempt, and then it goes into malice, this nuclear explosion. And Jesus said, when you do that, the stuff that comes out during that time, after what's beneath the surface in our lives. Jesus said that love would be beyond anything else followers could do to convince the world that Christianity is true and real. The most compelling evidence of the truth of Christianity is our love for one another. So this is why this started his Sermon on the Mount. This was key to building God's kingdom. That we show love to one another, this kind of love and kindness and openness and trust and gentleness and forgiveness, and be full of grace-giving heart towards people. In John 13, his exact words were this: your love for one another will prove to the world that you are my disciples. Boy, there's something about love. And so anger chips away at the kingdom trump card. Jesus is betting the farm on this thing called love. And said the only way we can lead with love is that we deal with the root cause of anger in our lives. He knew there was one rock-solid thing that would convince cynics and seekers of the reality of the Christian message, and that would be love, this pure-hearted, life-giving, persistent, patient, gracious, forgiving love. Because that demands a divine explanation. You can't just kind of chalk that up for people's good nature. You would have to point that back to a God. This is one of the reasons why I love Heritage Church and what we just accomplished as a whole church on Sunday. Just to be able to lead with love. This has always been God's trump card for the world to build his kingdom. Harboring anger stands in the way of this God trump card. Our love for God and people are clearly connected. We like to think that we can break down down in our human relationships and still relate to God as though nothing happened. I don't know if you've ever fallen into that before. Just saying, well, at least, I'm going to church. I can't stand the person I'm sitting next to. I can't stand my family. I can't stand the people I work with. I can't stand my neighbors. But man, I'm in church. God and me are tight. See, we want to avoid those two things and separate those two things. But this is what Scripture says in 1 John 4. He says, whoever claims to love God, yet hates a brother or sister, is a liar. See, this is this curious kind of linkage between our relationship to God and our relationship to others. The first church I was on staff with out seminary was a church down in Houston, Texas. And about halfway through the 7 years I was at that church went through what we call a church split. There was such a grievous argument and disagreement in the church just leaves. And I remember before that split actually took place, there were several meetings. And these meetings, since I was one of the pastors, I was in those meetings. And I remember sitting up against the wall, and, there was two, and man, so many accusations and so much anger and cussing toward one another in those rooms, and just judging people's motives. I remember sitting there going, this is exactly what Jesus was about when he started the church. And I'll never forget those meetings we had cut short because, get this, we had a worship night that night. And so I remember leaving that heated room and going into the auditorium and finding this row down front where all of us filed in. The next hour and a half, it was one of the most awkward times I have ever lived through. Because those people who couldn't stand each other, raising their hands, worshiping God, it turned my stomach. And I think I understand why God was saying you can't do that. They're linked together. Jesus farm on love. And if you will, love is the kingdom trump card. It's love between people like us. And if there's even a little bit of passage, drastic measures to restore that love. We all know the written and unwritten of etiquette when it comes to public meetings, right? For instance, if you came in, if you came into a ring of people, give a glare, or you just kind of show a little bit of displeasure to that person that's coming in, especially if they come to the front, one seat in the middle, and they're climbing over a lot of people to get there, right? And we're Christians, so we'll, let them, get through, but just want to make sure that they know that we're a little displeased with them for breaking this rule of etiquette. I remember before COVID shut everything down, there was a new movie that had just been released, and a friend wanted to go with me. He got there first, got a seat. I got there after the priest had just found him in the middle of a very crowded theater, but there was these long rows, and I thought, man, I'm going to have to crawl over several people to get to the seat that he saved. So I was going down the row and climbing over people. Right before my seat, there was this guy. I don't want to get here, but he was really proud of his beer belly. Okay, and he saw me coming, and I could tell, look, that he was pretty displeased that I was going to interrupt his preview watching. And so when I got him, he stood up, but instead of stepping back so I could pass by, he took a step forward. Now, I remember this clearly. This is last year. I thought, man, either I limbo underneath the belly, or I can concave myself and try to get around the belly. I chose the latter, and that was the most awkward thing because we're scratching contact the whole time. And so I finally got around him, and I was inside going, "You rocka," I can't believe you. But, second rule in gathering that we are quiet for the most part, and we'd want to tune in. We don't talk a lot to our neighbors. Have you ever gone to a movie and had people talk around you through the whole movie? We, again, know how to handle that. We turn around, we glare, whatever. Because they're breaking rules of etiquette. Anybody had a phone call that was answered in the middle of a gathering? Holy, that's incredible. The last one is maybe, especially at the end of something when everything's kind of wrapping up, it's kind of rude to get up in the middle of it and walk over a whole stack of people and leave early. People, again, are not very kind. We know how to glare. We know how to, make sure they know. So again, those are our rules. Now, you put the backdrop of what Jesus was talking to and the culture he was engaged with. And all those rules go up about 100%, right? Because in a temple gathering back then, you better believe you got the right time. You better believe you talk to anyone that you were tuned in. You better believe you would never leave early. So imagine Jesus saying this. He says, if there's a broken relationship, a strained relationship, and when there is love that is broken, justifiable cause for rudely exiting a worship service. Same Sermon on the Mount, next verse 23. So if you are presenting a sacrifice at the altar in the temple, and you suddenly remember someone has something, you got a little strife going on with somebody, leave your sacrifice there at the altar. Go and be reconciled to that person, then come and offer your sacrifice to God. You just got to understand that when Jesus was given this instruction, he was a whole bunch of mouths. What? You can't do that. God puts right relationships in the same league as right worship. They had never put relationships on the same league of right worship. Worship was way up in Jesus' culture. Man, if you got to the synagogue, you did checked all your boxes, you got there on time, you were a good, studious person, for the teaching, you didn't talk to anyone, you didn't leave early. That was as being really good with God. And Jesus is saying, no, there's something that's bigger. The most important commandment, he says in Mark chapter 12, the most important commandment is this. You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. Now get this. He says the second is equally important. That's what people missed. They put the relationship with God way above the second. But he says it's equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. No commandment is greater than these. They had a lot to learn how inexplicably bound together are the relationship with each other and the relationship with God. They didn't realize how God feels about community and love. So he was telling them that even if in the middle of the worship service, even in the middle of a great message, and in that time with the Holy Spirit, you're reminded of a relationship that's broken. He says, I give you absolute permission to be rude. Gather your stuff, get up, walk down to the row, excuse me. he says timing is everything. To break down part of the reason why Jesus is advocating extreme immediate action is that a ruptured relationship is like a ruptured appendix. I don't know if any of you had something like that, but the longer a appendix is ruptured before it's taken care of, the longer poisons get to continually leak into your system, which makes your recovery a lot longer. So he says, man, timing is everything. Don't let your heart be poisoned by hostility and resentment. Speed is of the essence. Don't even chance waiting another 30 minutes until the service ends. This is the kingdom trump card. Love that we show to one another. Love that we show to our families. Love that we show to our broken down. Satan wins. Take drastic action. Get rid of the toxins, because when you embrace anger, it eventually starts to consume you. He's saying stop using large amounts of emotional resources to feed and nurture the very thing that's killing you and killing others. Get rid of it. Extremely dangerous. You know, Ephesians chapter 4, the Apostle Paul, who wrote most of the New Testament, agrees with this. He says, don't let the sun go down while you are still angry, for anger gives a foothold to the devil. See, I think we miss this a lot of times, that our witness to the world hangs in the balance of how we deal with anger in our lives toward one another. That breaks down this kingdom trump card of love. You know, if God gives you the grace to reconcile the relationship that was temporarily lost, even if it's a worship service, our kingdom trump card of love is restored, and love is out in the forefront again. Beautiful. Do you understand why this was so important to Jesus? Why he started his most famous sermon talking about his blind spot. Now, as I close, I want to give us a little practical suggestions here, because I know that most of us are going to have a raka moment, probably today still, most certainly many times this week. We all face those, and it always draws us to make a choice, how we handle that raka moment. And so there's 4 things I want to go over as we close, and to make it easier to understand and remember when you're having a raka moment, even if it's in the middle of traffic, I'm using the acronym RACA, okay? So if you're taking notes, you could put the R, because that's how it starts. It says, and that R means remember God's heart. Right at the very beginning, you have a choice of how that anger, you're going to deal with that anger. Remember God's heart is so important. God's heart is that he loves you and wants the best for you. When your heart is embroiled in anger, those toxins become poisonous and create this huge barrier to reflecting God's love to the people around you. Many times we are dismissing or ignoring something that has created anger in our hearts. I told you before at the beginning that I'm kind of the trash compactor type person. I stuff it down. You know what happens when you trash compact a lot? It starts leaking. It starts smelling, right? Have you ever been around a trash compactor? You can't control it. I know there are many times where something will really kind of get to me, and I will just say, Brett, it will go away. It would, you don't have to worry about that. The problem is it doesn't go away. We aren't fine. We don't get over it. We carry it with us. And because of that, our hearts grow colder and more calloused. So Jesus confronts and rejects this way of dismissing our anger by giving an example, in this Sermon on the Mount, of somebody going to church, leaving, thinking they were doing something really important, and being convicted by the Spirit that there is a relationship that needs to be restored, and leaving that service. Because timing is of the essence. He says, stop, put it down, go deal with your anger. In other words, dealing with your anger is the most important thing than what you thought was the most important thing. Interesting. So let me challenge you as we remember God's heart. We all have agendas for this next week in our lives. What is the number one thing on your agenda list that you have to accomplish this next week? And can I suggest that really should be the second on your agenda list? Man, the relationship in our life, God's heart is to try to do our best to restore it as quickly as we can, to reestablish the kingdom of God. So R is remembering God's heart. A in Raka is act now, don't delay. Jesus says, and I need to probably say this. What I'm talking about, I probably should have said this before. I'm talking about when you say act now, don't delay, it's not to force reconciliation. There are going to be times we force it because a reconciliation takes two parties, right? And so there's going to be times where you need to open up your heart to be open to reconciliation, but you can't force it with the other person. That's not what Jesus is talking about. He also is not saying, don't just get in to why they're angry with you to keep peace. Because you might not be wrong in the issue that's causing anger. And this third thing, just be sure to really gear into this. There are some times in our lives where you are in a dangerous situation. And Jesus is not advocating that we stay in that dangerous situation with somebody's explosive anger. We have to find a safe place to get help in those situations. But what he's saying when I'm trying to get across when I say act delay is Jesus is saying quicken the pace when it comes to resolving conflict with others. Don't wait weeks, months, years. Every time you wait, the poison in your own heart gets more callous. It just cuts the needles out of the leaves of love. God's there's sometimes I know I have to step back and maybe go for a walk just to clear my head. I think that's okay. But Jesus is saying, do your best to settle quickly. Don't delay the confrontation. Don't let the sun go down in your anger. So remember God's heart. Don't delay. The C in Raka is to choose forgiveness. This is a choice. I had a great talk with a staff member a couple of weeks ago on the wrath of God. That's a heavy topic, isn't it? It's pretty intimidating. The wrath of God. I don't think any of us wants to be exposed to the wrath of God. But it's interesting looking through the Bible that God's wrath is not directed towards people. He loves people. It's great to demonstrate that on a shadow of a doubt when Jesus died in our place on the cross, taking the hit that we deserved. What he does get angry is sin. It's really clear. Even the wrath of God, the sin issues, God leads with forgiveness. And one of the most encouraging verses in the Bible for me is Psalm 103, where the psalmist says, he has removed our sin as far as the east is west. Have you heard that? Just a little bit how my mind works. So I'm going to take you on a little bit of a journey. Have you ever wondered why it's said as far as the east is from the west and not, let's say, as far as the north is from the south? Anybody? No? It's just me. Okay. I think this is really cool, though. Just kind of follow along. If you're at the North Pole and you go to Illinois, if you go from Illinois to South America, which way would you be going? If you go to South America, to the South Pole, which way would you be going? Okay, going in the same direction, going from the South Pole to Africa, which way would you be going? North, right? You would be going north then. So let's do the same thing. Let's start in Illinois. Let's go to New York. Which way would you be going? If you go to New York to Europe, Europe to Russia, east. Russia to California, east. California to Illinois. Think about that for a moment. That God didn't say as far as the north is from the south, because eventually they find each other. He says as far as the east and west, each other. Jesus is saying, forgive people, forgive people. And when you get there, friends, freedom starts to happen in your life. And the bitterness just lanced. And like a poison that's been killing your insides. You know, I love what Paul writes in Colossians chapter 3. Make allowances for each other's faults. It means we're human, so we're going to be hurting people. Make allowances for that and forgive anyone who offends you. Remember, the Lord forgave you, so you must forgive others. So choose forgiveness is the C. The last A is allow your attitude and anger to be changed. Love this. A lot of times when somebody blows up at you, it puts you in a defensive posture, doesn't it? You're backing up. You know, you're trying to deflect or whatever you might be doing, but you're defensive. This, God is saying, let's not get defensive. Let's get on the offense. I love what Paul says in chapter 12. If your enemies are hungry, what? Feed them. If they're thirsty, give them something to drink. Kill them with kindness. Allow your anger to be turned to love. They won't know what to think. And that helps your heart heal when you treat them with kindness. In Luke chapter 6, Jesus says, but to you who are willing to listen, I say, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who hurt you. You know, anger has a way of becoming our own prison. We think if we harbor anger at somebody, I think all of us are intelligent enough to say, no, it locks up our own heart. We're the people in prison when we harbor that. God wants to release every one of us from this. That the world may know that God is love. You know the simplest definition of God? God is love. He wants us as his representatives to lead the way in love. He knows how anger and not dealing with it appropriately can absolutely wipe out the kingdom trump card of love. This is why this is so important. This blind spot is so important. I'm going to ask that we bow our heads, and I'm going to lead us in some thoughts here. I think I would be remiss if I didn't first acknowledge that for some, when I got to that third point to choose forgiveness, for some that might be listening to me, it's really hard when you haven't experienced God's forgiveness in your life. So I want to just offer you to maybe take that step and just say something like this between you and God silently in your heart. God, thank you for leading the way with love. I've certainly given you a lot to get angry over. You chose to love me. You chose to love me and I can't debate. When you sent your son Jesus to take the hit that I deserved so that I can have a relationship with you that spans not only through the rest of my life, but through eternity in heaven. So Lord, I'm asking you to become the forgiver of my life and the leader of my life from this point forward. Lord, thank you for your forgiveness. And I tell you, that's step one. If you did this, we would love to know. If you could let us know on the Connect card you have here. We would love to come alongside you and just encourage you on the first steps of a new relationship with God. But for the rest of us, I want to just encourage us to remember God's heart when it comes to anger. He wants us to deal with it and not blow it off as something not that big. It is big, enough to disrupt a worship service, to leave early, to act now and don't delay. And some of us, again, we have agenda items that we need to rearrange this week. To read the trump card of love, to take care of those broken relationships. Lord, some of us need to choose forgiveness. Man, we're sitting here and we understand that we've been harboring anger, we've been harboring resentment for a long time that we just need to let go of and forgive. And Lord, some of us need to allow the anger to be changed to love, taking your model in our lives. Lord, thank you for this time in your word today. Lord, thank you for giving us very clear instruction about this huge blind spot that every one of us deals with, every one of us faces. Lord, can you encourage us to have your sense of priority about loving you is equal to loving the people around us. Lord, thank you. In Jesus' name I pray.